It is difficult to imagine the Philippine educational landscape without the private schools. The private schools help the state fulfill its mandate of making quality education accessible to all Filipinos. It is in recognition of this role that the Fund for Assistance to Private Education, a permanent trust fund for private education, was established through Executive Order 156 on November 5, 1968. The Private Education Assistance Committee, or the PEAC, was created as the trustee of the fund. The PEAC is composed of the Secretary of Education as the ex officio chair and a representative each from the National Economic Development Authority, Catholic Educational Association of the Philippines, Philippine Association of Colleges and Universities, and Association of Christian Schools, Colleges, and Universities. For the development of private education, the PEAC takes on the role of funder, advocate, partner, and enabler. A national secretariat headed by an executive director executes the policies, programs, and initiatives of the PEAC for private education. In 1989, a landmark piece of legislation, RA 6728, or the Government Assistance to Students and Teachers in Private Education, or GASPE, was passed. The GASPE Act, which was amended by RA 8545 in 1998, institutionalized government assistance to private education in the country. The Educational Service Contracting, or ESC, Teacher Salary Subsidy, or TSS, Senior High School Voucher Program, the In-Service Training, or INSET, and Research are part of the Department of Education's GASPE program. The PEAC implements the GASPE program given the track record of the PEAC in program management. The PEAC has been involved in the development of the ESC, from piloting a scheme, which was a precursor to the ESC in 1982 to 1986, to implementing the ESC in 1986 to 1991, and from 1996 up to the present. The ESC today has close to 1 million beneficiaries. Part of the PEAC infrastructure for the GASPE program is the Regional Secretariat. The PEAC-RS is headed by the Regional Program Director, who designates a Regional Program Coordinator for the day-to-day program implementation in the region. The PEAC has the following responsibilities in the GASPE program: orientation, ESC certification, SHS voucher applications, processing, monitoring, resolving cases of schools with adverse findings, regular meetings and consultations with stakeholders, research and data gathering, in-service training. The PEAC is also accredited as a local continuing professional development, or CPD, provider by the Professional Regulation Commission, or PRC. Participants of the INSET programs offered by the PEAC have the opportunity to earn the required CPD units for the renewal of their professional licenses. From 2012 to 2017, the PEAC trained a total of more than 70,000 junior high school teachers, and since 2016, an estimated 17,000 SHS teachers. The PEAC also implements its own programs of assistance. The Assistance to Programs and Initiatives to Reform Education, or ASPIRE, gave funding support in the amount of 33.7 million to 99 projects of private educational associations since 2015 to 2016. The Research for School Improvement Towards Excellence has assisted 79 private school administrators and teachers writing their theses and dissertation since 2015 to 2016. The Dissemination Assistance to Research and Education, or DARE, has supported 16 faculty members who presented their papers in international conferences abroad since it was launched in 2016 to 2017. The Philippine Education Research Journal is an online resource for decision makers, policymakers, and practitioners in education. Its editorial board consists of highly respected educators and researchers. The Philippine Education Conference is an opportunity for school administrators and teachers to learn from educational leaders and experts here and abroad as they discuss educational issues, concerns, trends, and innovations. Recognizing the inherent strengths of the private schools in achieving excellence in Philippine education, the PEAC is committed to promoting private education as an integral part of our educational system.
Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. From the Private Education Assistance Committee, ito po si Doris Ferrer, Executive Director of PEAC. Today is the last day in the series, Leadership, Innovation, and Dynamism Towards Educational Reforms, or LIDER. Last Monday, we started with the topic Future-Proofing Schools, which was presented by Dr. Ray Vea, President and CEO of Mapua University. Yesterday, we had two sessions, Uncompromising Quality Towards a Better Normal, which was presented by Sister Marisa Viri, RVM, President of the University of the Immaculate Conception in Davao City. And then we had at 10:30 yesterday, Father John Yang, President of Father Saturnino Urios University in Butuan City, to talk about fiscal discipline in the time of COVID-19. And now we have the last in this series, continuing the work of educating the conscience. LIDER, PEAC's educational leadership series, was designed to unsettle and disturb, move and compel, awaken and inspire. The session this morning shall certainly attempt to do all this, because as the session description so state, whether we are immersed in the world of virtual reality, or locked down in the real physical world, or simulating that post-COVID reimagined world, every person is called to make those critical decisions that could have a lasting impact on one's life, but also on others, if not the whole universe. And educational institutions have the challenging task to form the minds and hearts of the young towards those enduring values that could guide them in those life decisions. Amid the profound changes happening around us, populism, secularism, individualism, and the disruptions on work and school caused by the pandemic, 6 questions we hope to answer this morning. To start, we would like this question answered. What is the simplest definition or conception of what we call as conscience? I'd like to repeat that. What is the simplest definition or conception of what we call as conscience? Is there an imperative for educators to understand the value of educating the conscience of learners under their care? And how is this relevant to our current situation and the post-COVID reimagined world? How can teachers continue the work of forming the hearts and minds of the young towards doing good and avoiding evil? What are the most difficult challenges in doing this work? What about the school leaders? What is their role in the work of educating the conscience? What about educational institutions? Should they make a stand on critical issues in society that are not exactly education related? Ronald Preston, a contemporary scholar, said that we have a duty to educate our conscience. Given this, how should a person educate his or her own conscience? To help us reflect on and articulate the answers, we have 2 of the most respected and credible education leaders who at present are shepherding their religious congregations. We have Father June Viray, who is the current Provincial Superior of the Philippine Province of the Society of Jesus. Father June was the former president of Ateneo de Naga University from 2011 to 2017, and concurrently at that time Regional Program Director for PAC in Region 5. Prior to being president, he had been rector of Loyola House of Studies in the Ateneo de Manila University and faculty of the Economics Department of the same university. Other previous responsibilities in the Society of Jesus include the following: Superior of the Jesuit Community of Ateneo de Zamboanga and teaching in the same university, Parish Priest in Ipil, Zamboanga, Sibugay, and teacher in Religious Studies at the Junior High School of Ateneo de Cagayan, Xavier University. His academic background includes an undergraduate degree at the University of the Philippines School of Economics, Philosophical and Theological Studies at the Ateneo de Manila University and Loyola School of Theology, and master's and doctorate degrees in development studies at the University of East Anglia, Norwich, United Kingdom. Father June enjoys playing basketball and tennis, has great interest in photography, and is a great fan of Pope Francis. Good morning, Father June. I'd like to continue by introducing, of course, after Father June speaks, we have, he needs a very little introduction, but that's such a cliche, so I will introduce him. Brother Armin Luistro, who was formerly Secretary of the Department of Education, who brings with him over 34 years of experience in both the private and public sectors. He was Secretary of the Department of Education, where he led the implementation of the K-12 basic education program. Prior to this, Brother Armin was president of De La Salle University, and in previous years, he also served as president of the De La Salle University System and several other La Salle schools. From 2017 to 2019, he returned in his post as president of De La Salle Philippines, the network of La Salle schools in the country. Currently, he is a board member of the Philippine Business for Social Progress, the country's largest business-led non-government organization. In May 2019, he was appointed as the brother visitor of the Lasallian East Asia District to oversee the operations of Lasallian communities and brothers in the district, and that includes Hong Kong, I suppose. Brother Armin also served in various capacities in other government intergovernmental organizations, which include the National Youth Commission Advisory Council, the UNESCO National Commission of the Philippines, Technical Skills and Development Authority Board, NEDA Social Development Committee, Human Development and Poverty Reduction Cluster of the Philippine Cabinet, and the Southeast Asian Ministers of Education Organization, or CIMIO. He has likewise been an active member of the Philippine Council for NGO Certification, Knowledge Channel Foundation, Philippine Business for Education, and the Sidhai Foundation for Street Children. Brother Armin is a professed member of the De La Salle Christian Brothers. An educator at heart, he began his teaching profession at De La Salle Lipa in Batangas, where he worked as a religion teacher, a homeroom advisor, and campus minister from 1983 to 1986. Brother Armin holds a doctorate in educational management from the University of St. La Salle in Bacolod, as well as a master's in religious education and values education from De La Salle University. He obtained his Bachelor of Arts in Philosophy and Letters also from De La Salle University. So good morning as well. Magandang umaga, Brother Armin and Father June. So masaya ako na magkasama kayo ngayon. At nandito tayo lahat. Okay, sa webinar na ito, na hopefully we'll have a lot of the educators with us this morning, both from the public schools and the private schools. So without further ado, I think we're starting with alphabetical, right? So Ateneo before De La Salle. Father June Viray.
Magandang umaga po sa inyo lahat. Doris, good morning. Brother Armin, good morning. Magandang umaga sa lahat ng mga nanonood sa PAC na webinar na ito. Pinauna ako ni Brother Armin para kung ano man yung pagkukulang ko, siya na pupuno mamaya. Kaya Brother Armin, bahala ka na. Si Doris din, bahala na si Doris. Ang hirap pa naman ng mga tanong na ibinigay ni Doris. Hindi ko alam kung kaya kong gawin din namin ni Brother Armin to simplify what conscience is. Medyo mainit na usapin, so I will try my best. I'll try to share my screen now to begin my presentation. Okay. Can can you see? Is it okay? Okay. Uh, the title that has been asked of us to focus on is continuing the work of education. Let me begin by, sorry, ito na yung technical difficulty uli. Uh, um, First, in educating the conscience, we ask, how do you really educate the conscience? Educating the conscience of those entrusted to us is certainly very important task that has been given to us as educators. But first, we must ask ourselves, how do I educate my conscience? And the prior question is, how do you make moral decisions? How do you decide on what constitutes right and wrong? This prior question is important because we certainly have assumptions that shape how we go about educating the conscience. There are basically three beliefs here that will help us in understanding how we make moral decisions. I'd like you to pause for a while and reflect. What are your assumptions? How do you make moral decisions? How do you decide what really constitutes right and wrong? Think of a moral situation that you can put yourself in and look back how you decided on what is right and what is wrong. Maybe just take a few seconds to reflect on that. The first belief is there is only one correct response. And we call it the absolutist or the fundamentalist view of making a moral decision. Often, the basis of this is some authority like the Bible, church teaching, our own parents, teachers, those in authority, bishops. There is only one response, only one correct response. Second, the second belief is there is more than one correct response, and they're all equally valid. And this is referred to as the relativist tendency. The basis of this belief is each to his own, kanya-kanya, personal opinion, and is usually based on what I like or what's convenient for me, whether I am conscious or unconscious of my own motivation. Very relativist, kanya-kanya. The third belief is there can be more than one correct response, and some responses are more correct than others. This is what is referred to as the evaluativist tendency. The basis for this belief is weighing the evidence based on our experience, consulting with different views and perspectives, not only one authority, but other opinions, other evidences, and I personally take responsibility to evaluate these views seriously and make a judgment, even if it is tentative, according to my best lights. The first belief gives us a kind of a certainty, black and white, but it is false. The second spares me from the hard work of critical thinking. I take in whatever other people say, and that's fine with me. All right, that's your view. I respect your opinion. But the third challenges me to be open to different views and to exercise the hard work of critical thinking and personal decision making. It is pluralist, but it is not just accepting anything as equally valid. It requires critical self-reflection of my own human experience. I consult with others, I weigh the evidence, and ultimately, I have to make a personal decision based on what I decide to be right. Now, in educating the conscience in this particular moment in time, we are faced with a lot of ambiguity in the world. And I would like to quote one of my brothers who coined the term, the acronym VUCA. Parang bukas ka ba sa VUCA? We are in a world which is very volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. We need to exercise personal responsibility for thinking things through, especially in moral decisions, and making a personal decision again according to my best lights. Para naman hindi parang nasa ere tayo na pinag-uusapan ng mga bagay na ito, let's have a concrete exercise in exploring our moral decision making, especially at this time. We have the issue of Congress at the time granting or not granting the ABS-CBN franchise. July 10, the committee were deliberating on whether to recommend the granting or not granting, and that they would vote on. If you reflect on your experience, how did you come to decide for yourself whether you believe that it was the right thing to grant or not grant the ABS-CBN franchise? Let me refer to you the CBCP, Episcopal Commission on Social Commission's open letter to the congressmen and women. I'll ask you to read very slowly, trying to understand the statement that's come from the CBCP Episcopal Commission. I'll give you a few minutes to go through this particular letter. And the letter continues, "Be that is as it may, it is not our intention to pressure you, our honorable lawmakers, to vote for the approval of the renewal of the franchise of ABS-CBN. The only thing that we humbly ask of you is that you vote according to your conscience and do what you truly believe is right." Conscience. Vote according to your conscience. But what is conscience? What is the basis for my deciding what is right or wrong? Is it authority? Is it my personal opinion? Others' perspectives? Available evidences? Are there other moral sources by which I have based my decision? For the sources that I have used and referred to, I would recommend that if you have time to try to go over these sources, they're very useful. Richard Gula, which I have used extensively for this presentation, and an article by John Glaser on conscience and the superego, a key distinction. And I will use that to elaborate in my presentation this morning. And finally, a reference on Jim Shepard, see, judge, and act, Ignatian spirituality, is a useful tool for trying to come up with a moral decision. What is conscience? Well, conscience is often used, but very little understood. What is this thing called conscience? What is true conscience? We know we have a conscience. Our experiences of conscience are often ambiguous when we face big decisions in life or even in petty matters. We are told that our conscience enjoys inviolable freedom, but we are often given rules so absolute that we wonder whether conscience really matters at all. Our task is to explore and to distinguish moral conscience from the superego. The superego is a psychological notion of conscience, different from moral conscience. And why do we have to distinguish these two? For two reasons. Because if we are able to clarify the distinction between a moral conscience and the superego, it will help us to appreciate the meaning of personal moral conscience in our own theological tradition. And second, it will help us in the critical issue of forming or educating our conscience. Let me show you, one more, just to clarify the task. The first task is to distinguish between the moral conscience and the superego. Psychology certainly helps us to do this. It helps us to understand, clarify what conscience is, its growth and development in our lives. We know that the criterion of a mature moral conscience is the ability to make up one's mind for oneself, not by oneself. There's a difference. I make up my mind for oneself and not simply by myself. The mature conscience depends on a variety of human experiences of growth and development. In the normal pattern of our growing up, from a conscience which is subject to external control, meaning our moral background, our moral backbone is often from the outside. We do what we are told by someone in authority or what we see others do. As conscience matures, we move to a more internal, self-directing conscience. The moral backbone is now on the inside, and we do what we ourselves perceive to be right and want to do. And I think the image of a scaffolding will help us to understand this growth of conscience. Here is a picture of a cathedral, Lincoln Cathedral in the United Kingdom, which is undergoing repair. It has scaffoldings to support people there, but as well as to support the structure when it is being repaired. A morally mature person is able to let go of those scaffoldings because the values that he has seen has already been imbibed. A morally mature person must be one's own person. He or she is called to commit her freedom, not simply to submit it. We give ourselves our lives meaning by committing our freedom. So, this first task of the moral conscience versus the superego is essential for us to be able to come up with a simple definition. Where is the confusion often when we're talking about conscience? It's a difference between what theologians talk about as moral conscience, which is not equal to the understanding of psychologists of conscience, which is often the superego. You ask, therefore, what is the superego? And let me share with you a very short video that should help us at least clarify what superego is according to psychology. Sorry, technical.
According to my boy Sigmund Freud, personality is governed by 3 different personality structures. What he called the id, the ego, and the superego. Let's begin by talking about the id. According to Freud, this personality structure is fully unconscious, meaning that the id affects our personality in ways that we are not even aware of. The id is kind of similar to the little devil on the shoulder we often see in cartoons, quietly whispering in the ear to be self-serving and behave immorally. The id demands immediate gratification by gaining pleasure, avoiding pain, and reducing tension, what Freud referred to as the pleasure principle. Freud also proposed that this is the only personality structure present at birth. When a 3-month-old girl wakes up hungry in the middle of the night, does she consider how crying might affect others in the house? Does she think to herself, maybe I'll let mom sleep for a few hours before I wake her up? No. Infants demand immediate gratification, gaining comfort and pleasure, and avoiding pain and tension, regardless of who or what it affects. Next, we have the superego. The superego is also mostly unconscious and is similar to the little angel on the other shoulder telling you to take the moral high road, doing well for others. The superego is similar to what we refer to as the conscience, operating on the moral principle. To satisfy this personality structure, we must do or think or feel no wrong. When we do quote-unquote wrong, giving in to the demands of our id, the superego ensures that we feel guilty. Finally, we have the ego. Similar to the cartoon character who is trying to satisfy the devil and the angel, the mostly conscious ego serves as the executive. The ego operates on the reality principle, dealing with the demands of reality while trying to satisfy both the id and the superego. The ego is essentially our conscious selves, or who we perceive ourselves to actually be. In addition, the ego has the ability to unconsciously distort our reality, what we call defense mechanisms. Defense mechanisms will be addressed in detail in our next lecture video.
Okay, I hope that gave you some idea about the superego. Uh, just very briefly, the superego is an internal sensor using guilt as a powerful weapon. The superego is the ego of another imposed on our own to serve as that internal sensor. This stores all the shoulds or have-tos that we have absorbed in the process of growing up under the influence of authority figures, teachers, police, boss, sisters, priests, and so on. The superego tells us we are good when we do what we are told to do. And it tells us we are bad and makes us feel guilty when we do not do what authority over us tells us to do. What then is the difference between them? The superego pertains to the shoulds and have-tos, the source of command directing our behavior, whereas the moral conscience pertains to the wants as a source of commands directing our behavior. In other words, I choose this because this is what I want and not what other people tell me that I should do or have to do. Shoulds and have-tos belong to someone else. The wants belong to us. If you like, you can say, don't should me. I don't want to be the way that you think I should be. The superego is often, as explained in psychology, as a way by which we follow because out of fear of losing love or out of need to be accepted and approved. Whereas the moral conscience acts in love, responding to the call to commit ourselves to a value. Let me give an example that could probably explain this difference better. Fidelity or faithfulness in marriage. If I try to remain faithful to my wife because authority or the priest tells me I should be faithful or else I will get punished, that's the superego speaking. Or I should be faithful because my wife will beat me up if I get caught cheating. That's the superego. But if I choose to want to be faithful because of the value of my commitment and my love and fidelity to my wife, that's the moral conscience speaking. So the difference is from an internal and external source of that which directs our behavior. As educators, what then is our important task and goal of moral education? The task is to reduce the influence of that superego and to allow a genuinely personal way of seeing and responding to grow. Our goal? To act more out of a personally appropriated vision and a personally committed freedom and less of that of the superego. Now we go to the question of Doris. Simply put, which is really not simple. Conscience is me coming to a decision. It includes not only the use of my mind, cognitive, not only the use of my volition, my will, but it involves my feelings, affective, my intuitive, my gut, my attitudinal, my particular way of thinking and feeling, and even my body, somatic. When I try to make a decision, to make a vote of conscience, I make it with my whole person. In other words, conscience is the whole person's commitment to values and judgment I must make in the light of the commitment to apply those values. So it involves my whole person. Now, going back to that ABS-CBN issue, you have here from Solita Monsod in her column, and she is quoted there as saying, ABS-CBN should have been granted this franchise renewal within hours or within days, the way other franchise seekers are treated. Congress obviously is not going to vote their conscience. Maybe they have none. I ask you, did Congress vote according to their conscience or according to their superego? Therefore, in the formation of conscience, the question is not simply, what ought I to do? But even more importantly, when we say that we make a decision as a whole person, what sort of person ought I to be? Who we are matters in the formation of conscience. And therefore, let me give an example to you of St. Thomas More, the Chancellor of the Henry VIII. This is best dramatized in that Robert Bolt's drama, a play. And the scene that I will show you, and you can read very slowly with me, is a scene that takes place in the jail cell when Thomas More's daughter, Margaret or Meg, tries to persuade him to swear to the act of succession. Now, what is the act of succession? The act of succession is saying that Henry VIII's marriage will be rendered invalid, and therefore he can marry Anne Boleyn, disregarding the teachings of the church. Here is the particular scene from Robert Ball's drama. More, you want me to swear to the act of succession, Margaret? God more regards the thoughts of the heart than the words of the mouth, or you've always told me. Yes, then say the words of the oath in your heart and think otherwise. What is an oath then but words we say to God? That's very neat. Do you mean it isn't true? No, it's true. Then it's a poor argument to call it neat, Meg. When a man takes an oath, Meg, he's holding his own self in his own hands, like water. And if he opens his fingers, then he needn't hope to find himself again. Some men aren't capable of this, but I'd be loath to think your father one of them. We don't make choices, moral choices in a vacuum. We make them by how we see the world, how we are formed. The way we describe a situation, the choices we make follow from our character. Character gives rise to choices. Choices in turn confirm or qualify character. For choices are self-determining. And we can see this in the character of Thomas More, holding on to the values and principles that he held very deeply. One more example. Here is a picture of the Kenyan runner, Abel Mutuai. He was just a few feet from the finish line, but he became confused with the signage and stopped, thinking that he had completed the race. Let me read to you what actually happened. A Spanish runner, Ivan Fernandez, was right behind him, the man in the picture. And realizing what was happening, he started shouting at the Kenyan to continue running. Mutai didn't know Spanish and he didn't understand. Realizing what was taking place, Fernandez pushed Mutai to the victory. Later, a journalist asked Ivan, "Why did you do that?" Ivan replied, "My dream is that someday we can have a kind of community life where we push and help each other to win." Well, the journalist insisted, "But why did you let the Kenyan win?" Ivan replied, "I didn't let him win. He was going to win. The race was his." But the journalist insisted and again asked, "But you could have won." Ivan looked at him and replied, "But what would be the merit of my victory? What would be the honor in that medal? What would my mother think of that?" Values are passed on from generation to generation. What values are we teaching our children? Let us not teach our kids the wrong ways and the means to win. Instead, let us pass on the beauty and humanity of a helping hand, because honesty and ethics are winning. The value of role modeling in the formation of conscience. Conscience and character, therefore, are very closely intertwined. How do we acquire character? We acquire character by directing our freedom to loyalties outside of ourselves. Christian character. Christian character is formed when we direct our freedom to the person and message of Jesus as the ultimate center of our loyalty. Character is what results from the values we now make our own. When a value has been woven its way into the fabric of our total being, we delight in doing what pertains to that value. You could say that the just person justices and the loving person loves in such a way that those actions become second nature to those people who are just and to those people who love. Character predisposes us to choose in certain ways, even though it does not determine every choice. We can act against our character by making new choices which will change that character of ours. Last two slides. Conscience, therefore, is formed in dialogue with several sources of moral wisdom. Remember earlier I said, we do not make a decision by ourselves, but we make it for ourselves. The point of that is conscience is formed when we as humans dialogue with different sources of moral wisdom. As humans, we consult our experience, the experience of family, of friends, of colleagues. We consult experts in the field, in the area concerned. We analyze and test stories, images, language, rituals, and actions, which these various communities in which we participate live a moral life. As Christians, we turn to the testimony of Scripture, of religious convictions, of our creeds, the lives of moral virtuosos. We are informed by the judgment of theologians, past and present, who interpret the traditions of Christian life. Another source of moral wisdom is our own Christian communities. We access rich heritage of stories, images, language, ritual, devotional practices, spiritual disciplines, which nourish our own moral vision and practice, and even moral statements already made by our leaders. And as Catholics, for those of us who are Catholics, we pay attention to the rich heritage of stories, images, and practices, as well as to official teaching of the magisterium, which are pertinent to the areas of moral concern. The point is, if you want to form conscience properly, those of others and of ours, we need to use these sources of moral wisdom to inform what is in moral theology, the 4 points of moral analysis. The agent, meaning the person concerned, the beliefs that we have, the situation analysis where this conscience is being formed, and the moral norms that are given to us. We all take that into consideration. We cannot just simply, I will vote according to what I want. What I want has to be formed. A conscience has to be mature. It has to be in dialogue with several sources of moral wisdom for us to be able to make that decisive decision to vote on our conscience. Conscience is inviolable. We know that. It is a secret place where God speaks to us. But it is important that that conscience is able to listen to God, to listen to others, to find sources of moral wisdom, so that when we ourselves make that decision, a moral decision, it will be properly and well informed. Finally, let me just have a play of words before I turn over to Brother Armin. Katotohanan, truth. The formation of conscience is very much tied with our seeking for the truth. Katotohanan. Katoto is kasama, a fellow human being. A fellow human being searching for the truth. Mailap ang katotohanan, mahirap hanapin, minsan nagtatago, minsan nagpapakita, minsan nakakalito. Kaya nga kinakailangan magkonsulta to engage in dialogue with many others, not only my opinion, not only one opinion, but many others, because truth is very elusive. How can we make a decision in conscience when we are not properly informed? Tayong lahat ay mga katoto, naghahanap ng katotohanan. Kaya bilang introduction, walang iba kung hindi ang tunay na katoto na laging naghahanap ng katotohanan, Brother Armin Luistro. Maraming salamat po.
Maraming salamat, Father June, Katotong June. Habang nagpapaliwanag si Father June, naisip ko sana naging teacher ko si Father June when I was taking up my theology in Ateneo. truly, the explanation on conscience is very thorough and very much updated on current issues. Actually, hindi ko alam kung meron pa akong pwedeng idagdag sa discussion on conscience. But let me just try to look at the reality today and the context. And part of what I am trying to deal with, and what I'm sure all of our schools, administrators, teachers are looking at, is actually the area of what is the role of conscience today in this so-called new normal, where schools are closed, societies are on social distancing, and communities are on a lockdown. Aren't we just dealing with the hard facts of life? Hunger, travel, where we will get our food, livelihood. Is there a space there where values would still need to be discussed? Is it relevant at all? And I was really thinking much about it, and I was asking myself why PEAC in this LIDER series thought about bringing in the education of conscience as a critical component during this time, when I'm sure teachers and school heads are just so focused on how do I open classes online? How do I adjust the lives of our teachers and our students into this new online class scenario? And I think that that's precisely why we needed time to just pause and ask ourselves, but shouldn't we, during this important moment when hard choices need to be made, really be looking at those values, those enduring values that transcend the seasons of time? And I think in choosing what we need to do, our priorities, especially during very challenging times, then we need, and we need to go back to what is the role of conscience and how do we educate each other towards this. I think one of the areas that we may always find ourselves falling into is this idea that conscience is actually a most helpful guide for all of us, individuals, but also communities, as well as institutions. Hopefully, that guide is listened to not only after the fact, which makes it actually only in hindsight. Most of the time, like road signs, we are hoping that conscience, not just the superego, conscience will help us also make the steps when the road ahead is not very, very clear. The time of COVID, the pandemic, has disrupted our world. And some of the choices we have to make today are all clouded in a new situation that we have never found ourselves in. And more than ever, we would need a guide to help us navigate through these very different times. I was reading recently the column of former Chief Justice Art Panganiban. And this was related to the various petitions that were filed to the Supreme Court on the Anti-Terrorism Act. And I was one of the petitioners. And that was followed, I think, by 9 or 10 others, which the Supreme Court luckily consolidated. But the article of C.J. Panganiban on July 12 spoke about not only the role of conscience for individuals, but also the role of conscience, the role of the Supreme Court as the conscience of society. And he actually says, and he was quoting Justice Frankfurter. He says, the court, the Supreme Court, as Justice Frankfurter once said, is the conscience of society. In this light, the test of the magistrate's mettle is their capacity to stand by their convictions when the mob rages against them, threatens their families, and chants slogans of hate. For, he says, that is the nature of our conscience. It prevents us from doing the wrong just because it is easy, convenient, and pleasurable. But it impels us to do what is right, no matter how painful and difficult. I think at the end of the day, this is the true challenge that conscience and the education of conscience presents before all of us. Whether it is an individual, a community, or an institution, we are bombarded with many types of pressures. And at least one big major role of conscience is to help us continue to keep to the right path, no matter how painful and difficult it is. In our contemporary society, for example, listening to these other signposts seem to be very, very important for us. For some reason, the hashtag Black Lives Matter has become not only an issue confined to some Western countries. It has actually spread throughout the world, almost spontaneously, but sparked by an incident that caught the imagination, the hearts of many people. And Black Lives Matter is something that is part of the new landscape that we find ourselves in. So when I look at an issue and say, this is something that is out there, partly, I think it influences me, not only because it helps me make that judgment on what is right or what is wrong, based on a growing number of individuals who are sensitive to this one issue. But I think more than that, it's always directed to myself within. Don't we all have this temptation to stereotype, to look at people based on their color, their educational background, and what we think they are? If you look at the issue of hashtag Black Lives Matter, it talks about how I perceive others' judgment of someone who may have a color of skin different from mine. But it also is directed towards my own heart. Aren't there instances when I also have thoughts that could lead to racism or stereotyping? And therefore, whether I am in the Philippines or in a country where the movement is very widespread, part of what the pandemic asks of me is to be in touch with all of these realities, voices from all over, where my conscience, even now, is being formed. Not so much the pressure of a growing movement that may affect me and the world, but if there are voices saying, in the world today, some people are being pushed aside because of the color of their skin, should I not listen to that as well? In the Philippines, one issue that caught a lot of the young people's energies is the issue of Fabel Pineda, that youngster who was caught during the pandemic because I think she broke the curfew rules and the lockdown in Ilocos. But what happened to her and how she was treated was what caught the attention and the hearts of young people. When an issue like this comes out, isang nagbabagang balita, young people readily felt for Fabel Pineda and called for justice. Not only because she is one of them, but also because it tugs the heart of every one of us. Because if we are honest, we also have instances where we can objectify people, even our close friends, even our family members. We can use people and see them as objects rather than as persons that whom we relate with. When you look at the news today, I think this is mostly what tugs the heart of many young people. And I was asking myself, what for young people are the most important elements that could help form their consciences? Is it the church? Is it institutions? The traditional way whereby we look at the church teachings on social justice and how conscience becomes part of the daily actions and decisions of a human person is the traditional see, judge, act process that we may all be familiar with. It invites all of us to first of all be open to the reality before us and to really ground ourselves in what is right there. It's not something just virtual. Even if we are not there physically, are we able to truly see and maybe empathize with that picture that I see? I recently asked young people, and here I kind of shift into, is there a particular way and a particular challenge where adults like us, educators, and maybe educational institutions can help form the consciences of young people? I asked them about, a few of them at least, who work with me closely, what is the role of conscience and whether conscience even makes an important dent on the decisions, on the life choices that they make. It is interesting that among the young people I interviewed, one of the most helpful things for them that can open up their hearts, their minds, their critical thoughts on an issue is when it involves pain. When they can see that the painful thing helps them to actually weigh the choices that they are supposed to make. More than the question of what is right or what is wrong, the issue of rightness and wrongness becomes very, very intense for young people, it seems, when they're able to see that an action leads to pain or harm on others. Someone told me, a young person told me recently, if it does not harm others, it need not be wrong. Pain on others way more than pain on myself. It is wrong if it contributes towards inflicting pain to others or to myself, but most especially to others. And then I asked this young person, so what is more evil given the choices before you? He told me, depending on the magnitude of pain, the more it hurts others, the more evil and the more worse that choice is. I have no, this may be anecdotal at this stage, and I don't have any actual research study on this, but it seems to me that young people today are very sensitive to pain. Also to the pain inflicted on others. I was asking myself, is that concept of malasakit a critical component of educating young people? Because it seems that their sensitivity to pain, and sometimes it's pain inflicted on animals. It could be pain inflicted on people who are not their own friends. I was recently in dialogue with a young person who just maybe 3-4 days ago chose to go vegan. And one of the thoughts he told me was, when we kill an animal for food, then aren't we adding to the pain in the world? That's not something new, but it struck me because some of the choices that young people are making are not just about themselves. It's about also their capacity to feel the pain of others, even other sentient beings apart from just human beings. Now, if we look at this very important element and check on how young people impose or influence others in terms of their own value system, I think one of this one, I have to admit, I don't truly understand, but I've heard a lot of young people talk about this cancel culture, where icons that they hold dear, celebrities that they look up to, are made accountable for positions or choices that they make, unwittingly or wittingly, which young people do not agree with. Maybe this is what Father John is talking about as a new superego for young people that is created in this virtual community of the World Wide Web. It seems that a very influential personality, a celebrity, making a wrong choice can be shamed online when young people cancel them. I think canceling for young people mean unfriending them. I will not follow them. I will. They're nobodies. I ignore them. And it seems that this is a very, very strong. It has a very, very strong effect on young people. When somebody is canceled, almost every other one just jumps into the bandwagon, and it is their form of making important people accountable it is their spontaneous reaction to something that hits them that is not right. Among those issues that hit young people are issues that are related to LGBT issues, racism, I mentioned that earlier, police brutality seem to be a very important issue for young people, feminism, animal cruelty, discrimination against persons with disabilities, and the like. Here in the Philippines, we are still in the middle of that storm. Hashtag Iha Ako, featuring Kaki and Tulfo, is still raging among young people. It's about sexual harassment. Hashtag MeToo is still going around as a major issue among schools, and is a very important issue for young people. Whether we like it or not, this is the culture, this is the reality. This is the landscape where consciences, if we were to talk about it, of young people are being formed, rightly or wrongly. But then again, I ask myself, and this, I have been trying to reach out to young people. I don't have an answer yet. I ask them, so you react to police brutality. Why is it that during the past 3 years of this administration, when 30,000 victims of extrajudicial killing were being surfaced, why is it that I did not sense a lot of reaction from among young people saying that this is wrong? Why would Filipinos react to the Iha Ako and the hashtag MeToo phenomenon and issue, and not to Senator Laila de Lima when a created video, sex video about her floated around? Is it timing? Is this something that is outside of the purview of young people? I still have not answered that question. But the reverse of that is this particular culture among young people where the path to perpetual political correctness seems to be their superego, is the way whereby their actions and their words are formed. If you put this side by side with the cancel culture that young people are into, political correctness seems to be a very important component that helps young people determine what they can say or not say, what they can do or not do. It doesn't seem, the way I look at it, as something that they are more attuned to because they value its correctness, more than because they are afraid that they may be relegated to the world of the canceled individuals. But this seems to be still a very important element in the determination of their decisions and in their actions in life. Lastly, I think among young people, there is because Father June spoke about exemplars. For young people, there are so-called influencers. They are not adults. They are not moralists. They are not educators. For young people, the most influential persons for them that could help form decisions are youth idols. And they have a lot of following. It seems to me that many of the followers of these influencers are really focusing on issues that may seem peripheral to life choices, at least from the point of view of adults. I think they talk about these issues are about what they wear, the food they eat, the jokes that abound, and travel and the like. Things that are exciting for young people. But I was just asking myself, if we were to help form consciences of young people, what is the if influencers have a very specific effect on the choices that young people take, shouldn't we educators try also to enter into this platform, not for us to be the influencers, but maybe we need a kind of getting a system, a process, a program where we could get young people to be the catechists and to be the moral guides for their own peers. Just a thought that maybe our discussions later on can also focus and brainstorm. Finally, and just to summarize, let me just talk about various ways of forming conscience. During the last week, this is the latest picture of Father Flavi, of a balut vendor who was just gunned down for no reason. There were two young people beside him. He was targeted and he died on the spot. I have been asking myself, are there alternative ways of forming conscience? In the case of EJK, where victims are the poor, and there's a significant number of young people, including Kian Santos, who were part of this war on drugs. Recently, if I were to just look at the See Judge Act process, we were actually looking at how do you bring young people to see the reality on the ground, a little more deeper, beyond the news that they read. And in a Lasallian Mission Week celebration at De La Salle University, one of our programs was actually to bring in the widows and orphans of victims of EJK, whom we are ministering to. And we just brought them in small groups, in circles with young people. And without moralizing, without politicizing, we just asked the mothers, as the widows, as well as the orphans of those who were killed, to just narrate their story. It had a powerful effect on the students who were gathered in those small circles. And more than anything, I think it created such a powerful image and a name and a face that helped them understand the wrongness of the war on drugs. In the issue of judgment and expanding their critical thoughts, it's not just about choosing a type of food over the other. I think if we wish to expand the experience of young people, it need not be on a face-to-face basis. It is possible to ask them critical questions. Who, what, where, why? And I think when there is a platform, when there is a space where young people can be asked those critical questions, then their judgments are also formed. It is an important element where we allow young people to say their thoughts without correcting them right away, without passing judgment, but among themselves, helping them form and discuss how things truly are. But finally, I think as in all lessons of life, the most important element is, after seeing and judging, will those we form begin to act? Part of the real issue with the natives of the IT world is the click culture, where the action is confined to responding or sharing my thoughts on a particular issue. But to me, that is a real challenge, because from the clicking culture to an acting culture, bringing those issues that we have been discussing that are close to my heart in the virtual community into the real world is one important element that schools, educators, the church will have to walk with young people. It's not the time to tell them what to do. It's not the time to push them one way or the other. But I think neither can old people, adults, say it is your work. I think part of the challenge is, am I, as an educator, as a religious person, as part of the church, am I willing to walk with young people so that as they form their consciences, with a little help from adults like me, are they able to move from seeing to judging and then finally to acting? I will end there. There are many issues that we can talk about in this very important era. But I think our role is to accompany young people, because conscience is not only a pathway that helps them arrive at a moral high ground. It is also a path to discover who they are, into their deepest selves. Because every step and every action that any person does also helps me discover who I truly am, helps me define my own personality and my own identity. It is my prayer that as we start our discussions and our questions, we will be able to discover more and more our true identity as Filipinos, as Christians, as Catholics during this very difficult time. Thank you very much.
Maraming salamat, Father June and Brother Armin. Medyo marami tayong natalakay, no? Gusto niyo magbumati muna sa isa't isa? Nakita na ba kayo? Yung magkatoto? Ang pauso ni Father.
Virtually.
Audibly.
We got a lot from you, no? The sessions, what you shared, at talagang maraming comments sa mga teachers na nandito ngayon kasama natin sa webinar. Siguro from my end, what we can see here is that A lot of the questions we raised initially when we started the webinar have really been answered. Pero siguro kung mas sa konkreto, kung halimbawa teacher kayo ngayon, kasi pareho naman kayong may experience bilang teacher. At alam niyo na nasa gitna ng pandemic, ganito ang klase ng learners na meron tayo. Ano ang konkretong gagawin ninyo para maka-contribute tayo no, dun sa mission na maka-educate ng conscience ng ating mga learners? Kung kayo ay teacher ngayon, baka mas mabuti sa basic ed kasi baka mas marami tayong basic ed teachers ngayon.
Doris, sa akin, madali lang, kaya mauna na ako. Alam mo, I stopped doing my Facebook like for around 8 years siguro. Because I found Facebook to be unwieldy, ang dami-daming pumapasok, hindi ko kilala, walang oras. No? But you know, recently, I resurfaced in Facebook. I'm not sure if I can keep up with everything that's there. And then once in a while, I post things there. Only for one reason, Doris. Because I felt I was not being in touch with the issues of young people. I was reading about them in the news. I was hearing about what they're talking about. Pero hindi na ako makasakay. So one concrete thing I did, and it's still a struggle for me, is to enter again into their world. The world of Instagram, podcasts, Facebook, etc. It is a learning experience because I'm learning about this cancel culture. I'm learning about their influencers. And at least for an educator, since we are forced to actually move into the online education, I think that's not only for young people. I think it is for us so that we can enter into this virtual community and at the very least understand the issues and how young people deal with it, not to moralize, but that is a very good starting.
Salamat, Brother Armin. Say Father June, kung teacher ka ngayon,
pick up ko na lang kung ano yung sinabi ni Brother Armin, accompanying the youth. Unang-una sa lahat, more than before any concrete action, it's really taking on a disposition to want to accompany the youth. And it's not easy. The adults have already pride ourselves with what we have learned, our own experience, but like what we have been missioned by the Holy Father in the Society of Jesus, one of the 4 universal apostolic preferences that has been missioned to us is to accompany the youth in a hope-filled future. And the only way we can do that is by listening. We have to take a disposition of listening. We have to keep our mouth shut first and make sure that we do have a sense of where they are. And I think the valuable lesson that I gathered when I was in Ateneo de Naga, of course, when they found out that I had a Facebook account, they wanted to be friends, no? So, sabi ko, ang dami-dami nito, anong gagawin ko dito? I decided, mga estudyante, nakita ko, studying ganito. So, okay naman ako. Well, it gave me like Armin, it gave me a very good insight to what they were thinking, what were they saying, what are their interests, what concerns them most. So for me, whatever concrete action that we would choose to do, the prerequisite is really a disposition to listen to them. And that's not always easy. So in the online platforms that our teachers are going into, for me, it's not simply kasi everybody's concerned of delivery of content, kung ano yung the method, is it, the technicalities. What I have found helpful across the different schools that I'm familiar with was they would always make sure that the pedagogy is always there. with a desire to form. It's not simply to inform. Saan yung papel ng paghuhubog nung estudyante? No? Hindi transferring from a classroom setting to an online platform at patuloy pa rin. One of the examples that I like from one of our young scholastics, he was a scholastic then, he was teaching theology, is very good. When he would engage students in face-to-face, he found that some are very responsive, no? Tataas ng kamay agad kahit hindi tinatawag. Yung iba, hindi kumikibo. But when he created a chat group for his class, he found it very revealing that others were very engaged in giving their comments. Kasi iba yung platform eh. And that led to a deeper appreciation of the student, their concerns, and so on. So, yun lang. Una, disposition muna. We have to get it right in disposition of company. And then I think the rest will follow whatever way that you would like to do to inject more formative things in your online class. That will follow if you have that disposition.
Magaganda yung mga sagot ninyo, no? Pero yung kay Father Jun, sabi ko medyo mahirap yun. I don't think that's something that is a given, no, for teachers, that there is that disposition talaga, no, to form and not just to inform. Because the more difficult part there is the formation, not the dissemination of information. Medyo konektado ito kasi one question we got from Miss Exaltacion Agolito is that the school where she's teaching is a non-sectarian school. So if that's the case, then how can they channel how can they have all of this formation of conscience when they don't actually have the subjects, no, that will be for this purpose? So can you give some tips now, especially because the students, as we all know, are Generation Z learners. So yun, kasi baka ma-confine tayo sa thinking na kailangan Catholic or institutions, no, for the work of forming the conscience.
Former Secretary of Education, the floor is for you. Given your past experience, kahit tutulak na kita muna.
Galing mo, Father John. De, pero yung una ko kasing naisip, alam mo, Doris, yung mga siguro yung isang one very important thing to disabuse ourselves with young people is the formal classes are not your usual way where you can form young people. Kahit yung sa Catholic schools, pag sinabi mong a Christian living class, a theology class, those are important. But when I look at the bigger reality of the life of young people, their life questions, they don't normally bring it up in a class situation, in a formal setting. Sa labas ng classroom, in a canteen, under a tree, when you are on Facebook chat, those are I call them moments of grace where we are called to accompany young people. Pag formal kasi parang meron na kagad kahon, and that's very difficult for educators. Kung sabihin natin sa subject na to doon ko lang malalagay yan, at kung secular school ako, wala naman kaming area dyan for conscience formation. Hindi parang lahat ng bata naghahanap at may tanong. Pero hindi nila ilalabas yan doon sa classroom. Kaya yung tunay na teacher who wishes to form consciences and walk with young people, you have to be open almost 24/7 where they are. No? And they may call you at the wrong time, but it's the right time for them. So the other thing I learned is some of the questions that young people bring up to us are questions that are so difficult to answer. If these are LGBT questions, if these are, to be honest, some of those issues shock me. And before I can answer, parang natatameme ako because I don't have the correct answer. Kahit aral ako doon, parang ibang-iba yung sitwasyon nila. But what I have learned is, one, yung sabi nga namin na ni Father John, listening is so important. So even if I have nothing to say, to sit down with young people and waste time is already helping them form their conscience. Because you are creating that little space where they can begin to think. Number two, at most, more than tell them what to do, I ask them clarificatory questions. So that medyo yung kanilang naiisip, medyo na-fine tune. At most, those are the things that I have tried. But all of those, and then it rarely happens in a formal setting in a classroom. Most of the time, it's in informal settings.
Salamat, Brother Armin. So, ibig sabihin, hindi naman talaga kailangan na may sagot ang teacher.
Yep. Tama.
Wag na tayong magkunwari. Wala tayong sagot sa lahat ng tanong ng young people.
Si Father June, anong idadagdag natin doon? Non-sectarian school ang ating context?
Yung formation of conscience naman, hindi naman ang basis noon, hindi naman religious convictions lang. There are many moral sources of wisdom. And one of them is human experience. And if you begin with listening to the human experience of young people, that's, as Brother Armin says, that is already part of the formation. What is the experience of the community to which they belong to? What is their tradition that they come from? They may be non-sectarian, they may belong to a particular community, but they have certain issues and concerns. So, pick up ko din yung sinabi ni Brother Armin kanina, yung C-Judge Act. I think one of the most helpful also in our experience of forming is creating that space, no, for young people to be able to be free to express themselves. No? Of course, we always say as adults, ito may boundaries yan, hindi nyo gagawin itong ganito, but to have them sense that we are open to allow them to explore. That's what education is all about, diba? To make mistakes, yes, but we are there with them and for them. Yung seeing, napakahalaga, di ba? In the forming of conscience, how you make a decision is informed by how you see reality, yung sinasabi ni Armin. Black lives, so LGBT, they already have some things at the back of their mind. How do we help them to explicitate it in dialogue with us, in dialogue with them? So, meron silang pinanggagalingan ng mga tradisyon, pinanghahawakan. Simula tayo doon, as you would say. Education starts with where people are, but we have also our clear goals where we want to bring them. Gaya ng sabi ko kanina, pwedeng kanya-kanya lang. Sige, yun ang pinaniniwalaan ninyo, di okay lang. There are certain responses which are more appropriate to particular situations. And therefore, again, a very abused word is discernment. But how do you really do discernment? How do you apply that in? What is key, I think, for discernment is kasi discernment becomes, it's a personal discernment. Hindi naman ganun ang discernment. Discernment is always in the context of a community. In dialogue with others, dialogue with students, dialogue with your stakeholders. And the role of the educational institution is to create an ambience where people feel free to be able to express, and that they will not be judged right away when they're speaking out. So, yun lang.
You're right, Father, no? But there's a question here from Pinky Castello Copino, which is quite related. Schools actually also articulate their beliefs and convictions, right? So is there a disconnect there? Because you're supposedly like forming the students in a space that will allow them to see and judge and act. But an institution actually already articulates not beliefs and convictions and its position on a lot of things. paano ba natin ito i-reconcile?
Yung mga mission, vision, kung ano yung andyan naman, di ba? First of all, an educational institution is, we agree, di ba, na it's a place where we always say, oh, 21st century skills, critical thinking. Una yun, di ba, sa education, di ba? Yung papel natin, based on our own belief system, on our own goals that we set for the institution are there, no? And as Brother Armin was saying, walang kasagutan agad dyan. Pero, hindi naman tayo dapat we cave in and say, okay, yan yung pinaniniwalaan ninyo, edi okay na lang. Pero meron kami pinanghahawakan din. For example, Catholic schools, we hold on to certain beliefs. But that doesn't prevent us from engaging in dialogue. Para sa akin, yun lagi yung simula. Huwag matakot na makipag-usap sa kanila. Yun lang. I think, again, it goes back to disposition. So, kung ano yung issue at hand, o sige, ano yung palagay ninyo? Taliwas ba yan sa pinaniniwalaan natin, pinaninindigan natin? Ay hindi tama yan sa ganitong sitwasyon. And it's really a matter of also dialoguing and convincing the other to what one really believes. Diba? Hindi naman anything goes, di ba?
Dory, naalala ko lang yung for example, we have recently discovered sa De La Salle University, yung facade ng school is a teaching platform. Kung gumamit ka ng ABS-CBN and colors at the right time, it is a wide reach. Kung mag-hang ka dyan ng junk anti-terror bill, marami nakakapanood. At hindi lang yung mga estudyante mo, di ba? Hindi lang yung mga teachers mo. Mahaba yung diskusyon namin dyan. Kung ito yung pinaniniwalaan namin bilang Lasal Brothers, for example, at hindi naman kami palaging 100% pare-pareho ng pinaniniwalaan. Pero may proseso kami na pag may mga importanteng issue, pinag-uusapan at sinasabi bilang isang community, ano ba yung ating maiaambag sa usapan dito? No? So, in those instances, we dare put up signs. And we know we get our share of generous share of trolls, even from among our own alumni. We're saying this is our institutional ambag sa pag-uusap. This is how we see things. No? We are not imposing it on all the students, but because you are one of us, siguro naman, pwede nyo man lang pag-isipan, basahin, at isama sa inyong deliberation when you form your own decision or statement on this particular issue. I think medyo masalimot to, Doris, kasi not all educational institutions are able to arrive at something like that. But hindi rin naman siguro pwede na bilang isang institusyon sabihin natin wala kaming masasabi tungkol dyan. Sa akin, because we are an educational institution, mahalaga that we are able to proclaim even difficult and unpopular decisions, but not impose that on everyone. Diba? But at least by being open about it, we are able to help form consciences, because at the very least, people will begin to listen to one perspective, and hopefully, it is a respected perspective.
Yung dagdag ko lang na sabi ni Armin na proseso, mahalaga yun eh. Kailan kailangan na pwedeng si Brother Armin mag-post lang ng statement ayon sa kanyang sariling paninindigan o paninindigan ng Lasal o paninindigan ng buong university, because I have been asked that many times before, why are you issuing that statement? Is that you as a president, or is that you as a Jesuit community, or is that you as the Ateneo? So merong iba't ibang proseso na pinagdadaanan, and I think that can be a help to administrators. You have a very clear process. This will need to go through consultation at various levels. Certain decisions or statements that have to be made, and they have to be made urgently, can remain at the level of the president and his council, or it will require a board of trustees to make those decisions. The important thing is, again, as in conscience, no, very, very well informed. So kung gagawa man ng statement, sabi nga nila, dati, in the olden days, pag pumunta ka ng rally, half of the rally is won when you have already made sure that your folieto or your statement is well researched. So when you make a statement, dapat malinaw na yon to the stakeholders involved. No? I cannot just say anything as provincial because it carries the weight of the other institutions, the other Ateneo institutions. I ask myself, will this be needed to be consulted with the other schools and universities, or is it safe to proceed? Again, there is a process involved in making and crafting those statements.
Very good points. Actually, sinagot natin yung tanong ni Ms. Gilda Villador. No? Kasi ang sinasabi niya is, how can we educate the conscience of the young when what they see or witness and experience right now are brutalities in society? Parang precisely, no? Because what the youth experience right now are brutalities in society, then all the more should we proclaim, even if these are difficult or unpopular positions. That is part of our mission. If we have that disposition, right, to really accompany the youth and the young in conscience formation. Pero ang mga sagot nyo parang sinagot nyo na yung tanong natin about educational institutions actually discussing or tackling issues which are not exactly education related. Kanina pa natin pinag-uusapan ang anti-terror law, ang ABS-CBN. So hindi ito tungkol sa K-12 or voucher program.
Voucher.
Nakalimutan ko nga pala si Brother Armin, our immediate past chair, no, of the Private Education Assistance Committee. So obviously, pareho kayo ng position dito, no, that an educational institution is not, should actually, right, make its position, articulate a position, okay, on societal issues that affect, no, the stakeholders at the minimum and the entire society, of course.
Merong magandang image na itinuro sa akin ng aking mga nakatatanda nung ginawa nila kung nagkamali silang gawin akong superior, president. Sabi nila, okay, tinanggap mo leader ka, di ba? Leader ka ng institusyon. But remember, as a leader, you are a lightning rod. You will get joy, people are happy, they will go to you. Alam mo, ganito nangyari sa eskwela, no, ganito. When they are sad, they will go to you. Oh, nakakalungkot, ito nangyari. When they are angry, they will go to you first, like lightning strikes a lightning rod. And we must be willing to take the flak. Yun yung sinasabi na nakuha ko kanina kay Brother Armin. Even if we need to, but we need to make the right decisions, even if it is painful. We must be willing to face up to it. We need to make a stand, no, on certain things, and it will be painful, definitely quite painful, and we must be ready. Our eyes must be quite open. Handa ka na. Don't take it personally. Walang personalan, pero ito paninindigan. So kailangan. Let me just add a little na para sa mga nanonood na mga Bisaya, kasi I was playing on words, di ba, katotohanan. Katoto. Tayo ay naghahanap sa katotohanan. Lahat tayo, we're all seekers of truth. And it's important in the formation of conscience and education. Merong nagsabi sa akin, itong kasamahan ko noon, tagal na ito, sabi niya, sa Bisaya naman daw, kamatuuran. Kamatuuran. If you play on the word, the root word of tuod, tuod is, in Visayan, is stump. It's a stump. Ang katotohanan ay parang tuod. Sumisigaw siya, nagpapakita gaya ng katotohanan. Nandyan yan sa harapan mo. Tumatawag ng pansin. Pag hindi mo siya pinansin at naglakad ka, tuloy-tuloy ka sa tuod, madadapa ka. Ganon kalakas ang katotohanan at hindi pwedeng itanggi. At yun ang paninindigan natin bilang mga educators na kinikilala natin ang katotohanan, ang kamatuuran, even if it means that we have to stumble because it makes us realize what the truth is, and especially in very difficult situations that this country is facing now.
Salamat, Father June. Leon words ka talaga ngayong umaga. No? Yan ang bagong gawin. Ha? Pero narinig ng buong Pilipinas na nagkamali ba sa pagpili sa'yo bilang provincial. In-announce mo pa. Brother Armin, may idadagdag educational institutions.
Alam mo,
Educational issues.
I think the real problem is when we confine lessons to the classroom and to the syllabus. Because at the end of the day, the only real lasting lessons in life are those that we learn outside of the classroom. And when do we actually show that we learn them? When we move from talking, thinking into action. So, kapag hindi ako gumalaw, halimbawa may nagbabagang issue at pinanood ko na lang ang mga nagbabalitaktakan tungkol sa issue na yan, I am not a player. And I am not forming my conscience. And if conscience were a path to discovering myself, I lost the opportunity to define who I am. Diba? Kasi, di ba, parang every action we do, rightly or wrongly, determines who Armin is, di ba? That's why I'm like this, because of all the actions that I've done the past 58 years of my life. At kaya ganito itsura ko, warts and all, because of those mistakes, but also because of those right decisions. So I think the worst thing in life is when individuals, but also institutions, because we want to protect ourselves, so-called cautious stance, we don't open our mouth and we don't act kasi maghintay na lang muna tayo, diba? Alam mo, if we keep doing that, at the end of the day, lusaw tayo. There is nothing that young people or anyone else can look up to us. We are nobodies. No? We are lost in this fluid world. But I begin to discover who I am. Conscience is about identity, who I want to be and who I truly am. And I actually form that as I make those decisions. Sometimes, some of those decisions are wrong. Kaya kailangan balik-balikan ko siya. Pero that becomes part of me. No? Pag ang institution refuses to do that, pwede naman. You become safe and safe forever. But sabi nga nila, it's difficult for ships to be out there at sea. It's safer to stay near the shore. But ships are made to go out to sea. So what is the value of a ship made for the sea when it wants to stay too close to the shore?
Amen.
Oh, very passionate pa. Nung sinabi niya yan, talagang parang totoong-totoo. Pero totoong-totoo talaga yun.
Totoo, yeah.
Next, balik tayo, no, educational institutions. Pero kung ikaw ang school president, and tanong ito ni Jace Herrera, how will you support and help your parents na, ha? Or teachers lalo na, in the formation of conscience, di ba? Kasi we always say you cannot give what you do not have, right? So we're giving the teachers the mission to help in the formation of the conscience of their students, their learners. I'm school president or school leaders, yung teachers mo, yung parents. of course, ang learners mo.
Ulit nga?
Yung mga parents ng mga estudyante, yung mga teachers, formation programs na naman, di ba? We know that. We're so familiar with all of this. But, Brother Armin keeps on insisting, all of this are happening outside of, formation programs that are systematically, I suppose, designed and implemented. Or it's you complement, right? Formation programs with opportunities to really act. Paano ba? Teachers.
In the beginning, what I was presenting earlier, we said it's an obligation for us to educate the conscience of our students, they're the primary target. But that presumes that we are also educating our conscience. So our own faculty and our staff, and including our parents who are stakeholders of our schools, would need that support as well to form their consciences. If we accompany students, we have also an obligation to accompany them. So what I see in some of the better practices of schools, they have formation programs for faculty, for staff, and for parents as well. Again, the basic principle is taking where people are. You begin where people are. Like that's why I challenged our listeners in the beginning. What are your assumptions when you are forming conscience? Where are you coming from when you make moral decisions? Who do you base it on? From external or internal? Then if you are clarified with how you are making moral decisions, then you can have a better sense of how you can be formed in your own conscience. So in a very difficult situation now, in the situation of pandemic, the schools are scrambling and making sure that it's not simply the input of or the content of the subjects, but the formation aspect that can be brought in. So you hear now many different chat groups, prayer groups, different ways of continuing formation via the online platform. So pananagutan din natin yun as administrators, as school presidents to not to miss out on that. Kasi nahihirapan nga sa online, pero bahagi pa rin yun yung pag-educate sa ating different stakeholders.
Brother Armin, meron kang idadagdag? So, responsibility natin ang mga magulang.
Tatanungin ko sana ikaw, Doris, dahil kami ni Father John, we will never have the privilege of being parents. At naisip ko talaga to kanina, Doris. Sabi ko, among us, Doris, you have your own kids. And I'm sure they came to you one day, on one occasion, asking some of these life questions, some of which you were uncomfortable even hearing. So I was thinking, Doris, dapat yata ikaw ang sumagot ng tanong na to. Huwag mo kaming takasan.
Galing ka talaga, Brother Armin. Ibang klase. Kasagot ba ako talaga? Moderator ako dito. Hindi, totoo naman yung sinabi ni Father June, no, na talagang pati magulang nasa pananagutan natin. Kaya ako, very, very important sa akin as a parent. And kanina nga, I wanted to ask you this. Pag yung anak ninyo, in-enroll nyo sa isang eskwelahan, seryosohin ninyo ang institutional and core values ng eskwelahan. Because if it's a good school, then they will live those values, right? And it should permeate everything that they do. Para walang disconnect sa kung ano ang pinaniniwalaan mo at ano sa tingin mo ang gusto mo na maging values ng anak mo at kung anong nakikita nila sa eskwelahan. Because sometimes parents complain about how schools where their children or daughters are enrolled are so, they're so political, they're so they're all activists there. But hindi ba dapat alam mo yon nung ikaw ay pumunta sa eskwelahan na yan, hindi ka naman pinilit. That these are the core values of the institution. So even as a parent, pareho din naman ang sagot ko dyan eh. Wala akong sagot sa lahat ng tanong. Pero I always tell my children, if you have difficult questions and difficult choices, make sure I'm one of the first. Nakakausapin nyo kasi ayoko kayong umiikot kung saan-saan with this dilemma at hindi ang magulang nyo ang tinatanong nyo. I think I worked as a prefect for discipline and in charge of student formation. So we really, I agree with what Brother Armin was saying. No? In fact, I always make this my, something that I include when I give commencement speeches. No? Pag tinignan mo yung gratitude or valedictory address ng valedictorian, most of the time, ang milestone events niya outside the classroom. Wala naman nagsabing valedictorian na parang, I will never forget the time that I solved all of the problem sets in my physics class. They won't say that, right? But they will tell you all about their out of classroom activities that really form them, their values and dispositions. So, I think pareho tayo ng pag-iisip tungkol dyan. No? Pero sabi ko nga for school heads, no? Minsan kasi nakakatuwang magbasa ng mission ng mga eskwelahan. Kung totoo ba na itong kanilang mga core values na naisusulat dito, baka naman pinagsama-sama lang nila sa kung ano-anong pinanggalingan ng hindi malalim no, pag-iisip. And that it will have to permeate all your programs, curricular, co-curricular, extra. In fact, I'm not even very happy about doing that delineation. But it should all be, whole school approach.
Yes.
Minsan kasi, Brother Armin, yung mga guidance, ganyan, homeroom, second class yan eh. Diba? At tingin ng mga tao, mas importante yung mga science, math, right? The content areas. Ang second class nga pala, CLE. Ang third class, homeroom, guidance. Ganyan ang usual na parang prioritization na nakikita ko sa mga eskwela. I don't know if I'm wrong about that. I hope I'm wrong.
You're right. When I was teaching in Xavier University, one of my students said, Father, Christian humanism lang naman ang klase mo. Di bale kung bumagsak ako. Sabi ko, sige, tingnan mo pag bumagsak ka, hindi ka rin gagraduate. You really have to drill.
Hindi mo pinanakot mo, ha? Yung hindi gagraduate.
Sabi ko, hindi ka gagraduate kasi bahagi yan sa formation mo. I mean, of course, disposition of the student, di ba? Kasi makikita mo ko sa isang subject, ganoon naman din siya sa iba. Kaya...
Brother, you have any, because I saw in your credentials, your homeroom advisor, campus ministry, di ba? Nung batang brother ka pa.
No. Well, to be honest, my life dream is to forever be a homeroom advisor. The most meaningful engagements in my life as a teacher happened in I had three advisory classes. Puro first year yun sa Lipa. And all my life friends, even now, are those who were in my homeroom classes. Well, and to connect this back to conscience, inisip ko, why is it our role to form consciences? And I was thinking very hard about it. Is it because I'm a church person? Is it because I'm a teacher? Sabi ko, hindi. Hindi naman kasama sa job description ko yun eh. And there's only one a real reason why I engage in forming consciences, because I love the person that I engage with. When there is no expression of that love, the hell do I care? Okay lang sa akin yun. Because you are nobody to me in the language of young people. Cancel ka sa akin. So anong pakialam ko, di ba? But the only reason why I take time and risk making a mistake, even if I don't know all the answers, is because the person I am with is a person I truly love. And I feel it is my duty to share with you, well, first and foremost, your pains, your struggles. I want to sing with you, dance with you, and listen to you, but also to tell you what I think. Hindi naman siguro masama yun. I think it's in that context that the formation of conscience and engaging with people and even institutions become truly part of me. Otherwise, ano siya, para siyang another thing in my bucket list, pero hindi naman siya ganun kahalaga. Naisip ko lang, Doris. We're back to love.
Loving person loves, right? Father June. And love person justices. I like that.
Loving talaga yan si Armin. In fact,
Brother, what about loving Joshua?
Oh!
What can you say?
We're here.
what about what?
Yung yun na nga, yung ganong klaseng disposition, it's born out of what Brother Armin was saying. It's really born out of genuine love. You would not go in that direction, right?
Yeah. Well, I have an example, and I'm not ashamed embarrassed to share it. You know, sometimes our dinosaur generation, and that's I think sometimes how they see us, from the current millennial, and we ourselves tend to fall into that trap. Oh, ibang generation na yan, hindi ko na maabot yan. But when I look at my companion here, and I will mention it, I know he will squirm, but anyway, Father Bill, my companion, he's 79. He's an American, he's not a Filipino. He's very Filipino at heart. He can connect with any of our young candidates. And they love him, you know. They get excited when they see him. Why? Because as Father Armin was saying, he goes there, he listens to them. He spends time, he said, oh, I spend a lot of effort trying to listen to them. I don't necessarily understand everything, but he loves them. And you can see when he goes, after here in their candidacy, they go to the negotiate. Each time that he visits, they go wild. Parang, this is a 79-year-old American, a foreigner, who's far ahead of them, but he's 20, 30-year-olds. They connect with him because he really loves them. And he's not embarrassed to say that he loves them. And that's why he listens to them, he looks after their welfare. Pag may sobra kaming pagkain dito, dinadala pa niya sa kabila, kahit sa gabi. Ay, ano ba yan kung hindi pagmamahal, no? So I think again, I go back to my point, and I think this is where the challenge for us again, and the Holy Father gave that as an explicit mission to us, to accompany the young people, to listening to them, to accompany them to a hope-filled future, together with all their concerns. No? Armin mentioned a lot of things that they're passionate about, LGBT issues and so on. One of the things that also concerns them a lot is environment. Matunog na matunog yung environment na yan. Opening for us, older people na sabi, oh, they're interested in that. We see that as very important. Bakit hindi natin pasukan yung mundo nila sa environment? So again, gaya ng Master of Love, Brother Armin, tama siya. Tulog lahat yan sa relationship, sa pagmamahal. Wala na dahilan kung bakit magiging educator ka.
Correct. Hindi lang sa salita, pero sa gawa. I mean, it gets communicated, right? Yung talagang at pagmamahal, it gets communicated to the young, even if you don't actually say it.
Yeah. They'll see it. They'll see it.
So marami pa tayong pwedeng pag-usapan pero dahil alas 12 na. Siguro we will close with is there anything else you want to tell everyone who's like or share with anyone in the webinar right now? Dahil nandito tayo ngayon sa ganitong sitwasyon, no? Talagang it's very difficult for schools because of the pandemic. But other than that, they also you have your learners looking out in the world and seeing a world which is so difficult to navigate given all the issues that they see in the Philippines and in the world. So anong pwede nyo sabihin para naman hope-filled din ang mga teachers natin ngayong school year 2020-21?
Armin, ikaw na, ako na.
Ikaw muna, Jun.
Ikaw muna para mamaya na yung former DepEd Secretary.
Ano yung last word? Sa napakahirap na sitwasyon natin ngayon, individually, collectively, as communities, as institutions, and as a country, it really requires a lot of on the ball, being able to really focus on the things that really matter. What is it that we will prioritize? I say this because also as I'm a church man, but because basically I'm a Christian, in my belief, yung yaman pa rin ng Pilipino is yung pananampalataya. Sa mga sitwasyon na napakahirap, mahalaga na yung kinikilos, iniisip natin is underpinned by our faith. That should give some stability because we know the work that we do as educators is not our work. It is the work of God. It is the work of Him who calls us to do this. So we may not know the answers to the very difficult situations that we find ourselves in, but we have to always pause, put all our wits about it, do all our strategic planning or whatever. But it always has to be underpinned by our faith that listens to what God is saying, not simply to myself, but to all the community that I belong to, the stakeholders that are with me in this work of education. And lay it before the Lord. Yun naman ang discernment, diba? Pakikinig sa Diyos, sa bawat isa, paggagamit ng pag-iisip, ano yung nararamdaman, ano yung ating iniisip, para matugunan natin yung panawagan ng Diyos. Bakit tayo, in the end, we cannot allow ourselves to despair because this is the work of God. We blame ourselves if we are not being true to doing whatever we can. But at the end of the day, we underpin everything with our sense of faith. Amen.
Amen. Ang sa akin, i-contextualize ko rin sa social distancing, which is in vogue these days. Parang the best response to keeping ourselves safe and healthy is not to interact. The farther I am from you, the safer I am. But we all realize that that's a fallacy. That while we do all the precautions and do the physical distancing, this is a time to actually engage. And there are many ways of engaging, but at the end of the day, the real challenge of the pandemic is what the gospel tells us. It's only love that matters, di ba? Why will I engage? Takot ako na lumabas o kaya mag-virtual community dahil that's a big risk. But so are all the other things in life. And if we go back to our main topic on formation of conscience, it doesn't make sense unless it is about a person I love. Then helping form consciences begin to have some real sense. If it's my own children, I engage with that. but I cannot form he or she whom I do not love. So we always have to start with that loving engagement. And this is the best time, the best gift of the pandemic, to recognize that in the midst of all of this anxiety and fears, the only way to cure that and to address that is still go back to the basics of learning to love truly the person in front of me, whether that's in reality, face-to-face, or in the web. Thank you, Doris. Thank you, Father June.
Amen.
Amen ulit, di ba? Physically distant but socially and emotionally engaged, di ba? Hindi nga masyadong okay ang social distancing. It's a physical distance, right? As part of the health protocol. But you should be socially engaged, right? And with your students, emotionally engaged. Okay? Binibigyan ako dito ng what's this? Ng note nitong nandito, Butch, Presi, and May. Please tell the audience to rewatch the recording kasi napakaganda ng feedback at pwede itong ulit-ulitin na panoorin or i-share sa mga teachers ninyo sa eskwelahan so that we can there's really a lot to ruminate, no, especially on the discussion of Father June on the moral conscience, no, versus the super ego. That's such a very enriching discussion. Of course, Brother Armin went into all the issues, right? And ngayon lang natin nalaman, ito talaga si loving brother.
Of course.
Wala tayong kalaban-laban kay loving brother. So, pahingi na rin ang slides ninyo kasi hinihingi din ito ng ating mga viewers, no, from the first webinar we had with Dr. Vea. We'd like to give the slides. So we actually wanted LIDER to be like part of the formation program of schools. Because they could just rewatch the video in the Facebook page of PAC, of Cocopeia, of PACU, and of Intelligente Publishing. Ulit-ulit, pwedeng panoorin ang mga videos. Estrada Nakinulo, Attorney Estrada rin, is posting this so that we can reach public school teachers and even government officials, okay, so that we can articulate the issues, the concerns, and where we are as private schools at this time. So maraming salamat, Brother Armin and Father June.
Thank you for having us.
Nagpapa natin to 2 months ago yata at agad-agad naman kayong pumayag, no, na gawin natin.
Paano kami makakatanggi?
Hindi pwede.
Ha? Wala naman kayong slots, Bakit? Pwede kayong tumanggi. Pero salamat sa inyo. And we'd like to thank all our viewers for being with us this morning, or it's already afternoon. And we'd like to end by acknowledging all those who worked with us for the last 3 days. So the following actually supported and assisted the PAC Educational Leadership Series, Leadership, Innovation, Dynamism Towards Educational Reforms. We'd like to thank our speakers the last 3 days, Dr. Ray Vea on future-proofing schools, on uncompromising quality. We have Sister Marisa Viray on fiscal discipline, Father John Yang, and of course, this morning, until 2 minutes ago, Brother Armin Luistro and Father June Viray, who I said were shepherds of their congregations at this time, on the topic of continuing the work of educating the conscience. We'd like to thank all those who cross-posted these webinars. Attorney Joseph Noel Estrada Nakinulo, Cocopeia, PH, Philippine Association of Colleges and Universities, the Intelligente Publishing, and Vival Group. And from the PAC National Secretariat, those who were with me and with all of us coming together to conceptualize and implement LIDER. We have Presi Labao, our training officer, Butch Ebarola, our IT officer, Grace Camesa, our director for administration, May De Malanta from the training unit, Red Gallego from the IT unit, Terence and Alan also from the IT unit, and the entire training and development unit of PAC National Secretariat, the entire information technology information management unit, the communications and research unit headed by Denise Adriano, and the finance unit. buong pamilya naman ng PAC National Secretariat ang nagtrabaho for this leader. And we'd like to invite you to LIDER in December 2020. Pagkatapos po ng lahat ng in-service training activities natin for junior high and senior high teachers, we will have another series on leadership, innovation, dynamism towards educational reforms. Maraming salamat sa lahat at magandang hapon po sa inyo lahat. Yun, tapos na. Hey, Father Joe.